first and help at food banquet Thumbs Up. The last time we handed out produce, we didn't know how many people were going to be there, and we didn't load enough up, and it was all gone before everyone got some. Sometimes I run into the people that we deliver food to, and they always ask me when we are going to come and give them some more. I think people with disabilities should get food stamps because they need them. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Ma'am?
Hey, my name is Joe Ames, and I live in an apartment by myself. And I have SSI, and I pay my gas bill by myself, and it comes out of my pocket. And I work at food bank, and I take food home with me.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Tony Anderson, Executive Director of the ARC of California. And quickly, we're here obviously in opposition to the cuts in in-home sports services and the supplemental. As you know, we struggle every day to integrate and to participate fully in communities, and it's extremely difficult. Maybe what you don't know is that the employment rate, and this is employment rate for people with developmental disabilities in California, is 14%. That's employment, not unemployment. Right. This is, I mean, that's a great example of why there's so many people, or that there are so many people that are existing and living off of their Social Security, SSI, SSP. Every dime that they lose, then that creates a brand new barrier to them living on their own and participating. And then the other piece is the family support. The ARC is primarily family caregivers, and you know that that is what's making this happen for people with developmental disabilities and disabilities throughout the state. Families are stepping up and doing incredible work and finding different ways to support their loved ones at home. And every time we diminish any piece of that support, you know that's where we start to see more institutionalization. And so I just, you know this part, but I'm here to make sure that that we continue to say that, and that we continue to try to do something about that.
Again, you and some of the other regional center types and folks might want to help us with this question of how many folks who receive IHSS that allows them to continue working in supported employment or some of those other things. There may be more interaction between those programs than we've been thinking about. So.
Right. We're actually doing a survey with the Family Caregivers Association to pull that out.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Great. I'm Rebecca Gonzalez. I'm here on behalf of the National Association of Social Workers, California chapter, and we oppose these cuts because they affect the health and well-being of our clients. As you know, social workers are on the front lines of connecting clients to services, and for those reasons, we oppose the cuts to IHSS, SSI, SSP, and also the elimination of the CAPI and CFAP program.
Thank you. We're going to go to her, and then we'll come back over you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Janie Whiteford. I'm president of SECA, which is a statewide organization of advisory committee members. We have, out of the 54 counties, we have 23 members, paid members of our organization. We just had a conference last weekend, and we had 185 people there. As you know, the advisory committees for IHSS have to have 50% consumer participation. So we had about 100 consumers of in-home support services there. I cannot tell you how frightened folks are about these potential cuts coming down and how concerned they are of how this is going to affect their lives. So many of our folks, and we know we're in the grassroots, we know what's going on right there at the county levels with all of the the constituents and consumers that we represent as advisory committee members how devastating these cuts will be. We really ask you to not let these cuts go through and to work very hard to find alternative ways of funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joe Von A.G. I'm the Political and Legislative Director for United Domestic Workers. We're the statewide home care local of AFSCME. What we've seen today, I think, is a wide spectrum of those who receive IHSS services. I've been around IHSS since 2003. I think it is long overdue that we have a thorough conversation on IHSS, really delving into the program, looking at the inefficiencies, looking at what works, what doesn't work, us getting out of our ideological corners. What happens all too often is we have people who are opposed to the program. They're opposed to it. They can't fully tell you why. They just want to eliminate the program. Then we have those who support the program sometimes who say, can't touch the program at all, and understand that. But now is the time we need to come together, have those thorough conversations. It is long overdue. I beg of you, please let's have them. Let's start now. Senator Cheney, I hate that this is your last year because we should be a part of those conversations, but please let's have those conversations. No longer can we operate like this is a state. You see the people that are here. We've seen reports year after year, the most recent being the LAO report. They're just snapshots. They don't really tell you the full picture, and I think you saw that today. So please, let's have that conversation, and I wish you could spearhead it before you leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've been trying to have that conversation for a while, and I think it's a realignment conversation with the counties, and it's a discussion of where's the cost there, what do we do with social workers, and this question that I raised about the value of, even though we've reduced them, public authorities, and how to make that whole system more efficient. And maybe with all this new fingerprinting, if we had a registry that was for everybody, and I don't know, there's some other ways to look at some of those things, so I appreciate your willingness to engage in that conversation. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, Martha Flammer, representing the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, and I dropped off a chart that demonstrates the number of people that are impacted on a district-by-district basis in Los Angeles County. Yes, I gave it to the sergeant, and I don't know if they have it accessible there.
Have that one yet? I got so much paper here, I don't know.
I know
if
that they were going to hold on to it there until the end and
okay.
then distribute it later.
Okay, thank you.
But I did want to share regarding the IHSS functional index proposal, which we are opposed to. The impact is greater in Los Angeles County at 92%. It affects over 171,000 IHSS consumers. Now, earlier today, you asked about the breakdown of the consumers, and of those in Los Angeles County, over 112,000 are over 65. Over 46,000 are between 20 and 59, and 6,800 are 19 years and younger. So I just wanted to emphasize also again what Mr. Mecca mentioned earlier is also the unemployment rate would increase as well. Currently, the Los Angeles County unemployment rate is 12.3%. So the reduction of these services would also cause a residual impact of the providers losing their employment and pushing up our unemployment rate and affecting our economic situation in Los Angeles County. Also, regarding the CAPI proposal, an advocate earlier referenced that this also has a significant impact on Los Angeles County. Currently, CAPI participation is at 3,100. Now, if 100% of these people applied for general assistance, that would be an $11 million cost shift to Los Angeles County. And what we are experiencing today, between September 2008 and November 2009, there is a 38% increase in general assistance applications, averaging over 19,000 applications per month. So as you can tell, that this is already the economic impact is pretty difficult, and we'd like to, again, see what we can do to address the situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mike Carroll with the Western Center on Law and Poverty. I know you'll be shocked to hear that we oppose the cuts to the SSI grant and the elimination of CFAP and CAPI. But beyond that, I wanted to say, a couple of things. On CAPI and CFAP, remember that, of course, this was the reason that we're paying for these programs is because the federal government abandoned their obligation to provide for these folks. And as the governor has done this year and the legislative leadership, maybe we ought to be taking this back to Washington as part of immigration reform.
I've tried to make it back every package I've taken to Washington in the last 10 years, and so far I got no traction.
And I think maybe year 11 might be the year.
I did encourage the leadership to raise that issue when they were back there. I do not know how far into the discussion it made it, but I think we need to point out, a lot of folks to their Congress people, it might be useful to point out to Congress. It can't be that. That's why I asked the nationwide numbers, because it can't be that much to re-include folks on a nationwide basis.
If the governor would lend his voice to that, I think we'd get further. And so I think that would be one thing we would certainly recommend in that arena. And I also want to acknowledge what Martha Flammer just said, which is the substantial cost shift that these proposals would have on county governments. Many, many people would end up on county indigent programs, general assistance, and other programs, and causing, so the folks aren't going to go away, the needs aren't going to go away, but we have to find a way to take care of them. And then lastly, on the SSI, obviously we oppose the grant cuts, but on that cash out issue, we're very open to smart, creative solutions that would allow us to help some of the families get food stamps, but not hurt the families who need those food stamps and are currently getting them. You know, we're a little skeptical of the data that we heard from DSS, but we're willing to look at it, and we look forward to working with the committee and seeing if we can find a creative way to get more food stamps for SSI recipients.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. The final word on these.
Robert Harris on behalf of SEIU. Just to go back again for the third time, because it's so important, and in the fact that if the governor's final proposal, if enough money doesn't come from the feds, were to take place, the resultant increase in unemployment in California would be probably bigger than the second quarter of 2009 drop, maybe the largest increase in one hunk in unemployment since the Depression of the 30s. It would push us up to 2.6 million unemployed from 2.2. So it would have a tremendous negative financial impact way beyond IHSS. In terms of the program itself, we had members here to testify today to tell you exactly what happens, that they can't perform the service at minimum wage. The cost of living in the Bay Area is tremendous. You can't live on $8 an hour, and they would then be confronting the situation of not taking care of their kids or the clients that they have. In terms of the functional index cuts, those are just don't work. You had people here telling you that they would affect them, and yet they weren't people who can function independently. The LAO had suggested last week that our cuts would somehow be a better way to go, and then you had someone testify today that a mentally ill person who is able to remain out of mental hospitals and living a functional life with 80 hours a month, and without that 80 hours a month they end up hospitalized. That's not the solution. There might be a better way, but that isn't something that gets us to any kind of budget solution this year. I don't envy your trying to do that, but I do respectfully request that you keep in consideration the value of this program, the fact that this program is a national model. And in fact, the feds don't complain about the money they spend on this program because it saves them money as well as saving the taxpayers of California money. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you all for your patience and for everybody being here. And it is 5:30, and we only have 3 more issues and there aren't very many people out there, so I take it that means they won't have a lot of public testimony. Who wants to come up? Finance, LAO, on, let's do all 3 of these. Finance, foster care, the redirection, and the Prop 10. Well, the Prop 10, the redirection is really just, oh, I see. It's really just from the other thing, sort of a conforming issue, really, in some ways. But LAO?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Min Sun Park with the Legislative Analyst's Office. This next item is related to the $6.9 billion in additional federal funds that the administration is seeking. Specifically, the proposal is that the administration would ask the federal government to provide federal funding for all children placed in the foster care program. Currently, only 71% of the foster care caseload is eligible for federal funding. So this proposal would require changes in federal law and regulations related to eligibility requirements for federal Title IV-E funds, including the elimination of a requirement that children come from families who meet income standards that apply to the 1996 Aid to Families with Dependent Children program.
But I mean, given the CalWORKs grant cuts of the last few years, are we actually above that in the current? I mean, what was the AFDC 1996 amount? Anybody know?
We can look that up for you and get back to you.
I'll bet it's not a lot higher than what we're paying today in grants, but I'll reserve judgment.
We'll check on that. The budget is assuming an implementation date of June 1st, 2010, with general fund savings of $7.5 million in the current year and $86.9 million in 2010-11. And as your agenda notes, those numbers do reflect the enhanced federal match for foster care under ARA, extended through the end of the budget year as proposed by the governor and reflected in the president's budget. We do recommend that the legislature support this proposal. We think that the federal requirements or eligibility requirements for federal funding for foster care are tied to outdated income standards from a program that no longer exists. Moreover, the federal government does mandate that the state protect all children from abuse and neglect regardless of income. Therefore, there isn't really a strong policy rationale for the
Well, no, I think this was on the list of what leadership and the governor went back east on. My question of the day would be, what's the likelihood of getting it, not
Right, that
whether
was-
we think it's a good idea or not. I
that
think we
was
all
our
think it's a good
other-
idea.
That was our other recommendation, is we haven't seen any indication that these federal changes will occur anytime soon, so we'd recommend that the budget not reflect savings from this proposal at this time.
Yeah, well, that's the real problem is, some of these things, I think in some ways we're in reasonable ballpark to assume the extension of ARA because it's in the congressional bill, it's in the governor's budget, the president's budget. And now we've got a little better insight because we have the president's budget yesterday. So a couple of these things, if it's in the president's budget and it's also in the House bill, you got half a possibility that could pass right now. And I think this one, I don't know, is there a bill pending that we know of?
At this point, we don't have specifics on this one, but it is part of the broader request that the administration is continuing to press at the federal level. As time goes on, we'll have a better sense of whether or not we're going to get it, but at this point, it is part of our request.
Yeah, well, we're all, we agree. I don't think that's the issue. The question is, do you have any congressmen who agree with you? And have you spoken to Senator Feinstein and Senator Boxer, and are they going to try to put it as an addendum to the president's budget or the ARA extension? Help us out here.
Yeah,
Somebody.
I don't have any.
Don't we pay a bunch of people back in Washington to do this stuff for us? Maybe we could cut them and anyway. All right. We just need to get on that and find out where we are. They did visit Washington. I don't know what the answer was. I know all of the leadership supported all of these things, and they did talk to departments and as well as members of Congress about these things. Obviously they have their own deficit problems, but some of these are not that hugely costly from their perspective, and they're enormously helpful from ours. So, but I think it is problematic to ask us to do it now and score it for June with no evidence that it's even pending before Congress at the moment. That troubles me. I think some of the other ones where, we could sort of assume that it could pass by July, is different. But some of these, whatever we have to do to support it, I think everybody's for that. That's not an issue. But I would like to see what what happens when you don't use that income. It is wrong to use the out-of-date thing, but I wonder. Is the new idea to just have no income test, or it would just be a different income test?
No income test.
Oh, well, that would be helpful. Okay. All right. Finance, you want to tell us about your Prop 10 proposal and why you think this goes? I think we already had this conversation once this year, but yeah, something about that. What is it that you're going to do to re-persuade 66% of the people that they think differently now than they did last June?
Madam Chair, John Wardlaw, Department of Finance. The administration feels it's incumbent upon the administration to put forward to the voters, once again, the choice of how dollars can be best leveraged in the state. We remain hopeful that the voters will see that these dollars ought to be leveraged from the Prop 10 commissions for the purposes of benefiting children's programs throughout the state.
Well, when the administration is prepared to sign the bill to put Prop 49 with it, give me a call. Prop 49 doesn't even have a funding source. It's $500 million cost to the general fund. You don't want to give schools flexibility on that. When we've proposed that in the past, when we tried to put that in the package, I think all of the legislature voted for it. It was vetoed. So I don't know. And that one hasn't been tested. This one's been tested. It kind of didn't work. So it's just so soon after the last election. I just think it's difficult for any of us to understand what would have changed the voters between then and now.
Madam Chair,
Senator Delano.
Curiously, there are similar dollar amounts, aren't they?
Well, Prop 49 is $500 million, but it's Prop 98. So the issue there would be not taking the money like this does and might be more amenable to the voters because it's just creating flexibility for schools to make decisions about priorities in terms of after-school programs versus in-school programs. And while we all think after-school programs are important, at some level that may be that an individual school district has a greater need for a teacher in class than they do, or for class size reduction than they do for all of their after-school funding. I don't know how to think about that. I don't really want to deprive after-school programs, but I think, it's been awkward to just go with Prop 63 and Prop 10, which have already been disapproved by the voters in terms of shifts. Much as some of us might agree with you, and that's why we put it on the ballot last year, because we thought it might be a viable source for healthy families. But the voters begged to differ, and I don't know how I count on that this year. But I don't know. Somebody have a different view? I don't know. You think, tell me. Do you think we could get away with it?
Well, it's hard to draw any conclusions from the last election other than the voters were angry and they sent a solid message. They wanted us to solve the problem. So if we come back at them again, we're solving the problem, we're giving them another option at it, and they've felt this for some months more. So I don't think you can read too much in before. There are no easy answers right now, so sometimes you got to go over the ground that we've already plowed, to use a farm metaphor.
No, maybe if there were, I don't know. Maybe then their voter message. I disagreed with some people who thought the message last year was no new taxes too. So, because I don't think that's what they were saying either. Because I think some of those things were so complicated, there was no way for anybody to figure out, and then they just said no to everything. So
it was easier to message that way. And if you'd come in my district, you would have heard the no new taxes pretty loudly.
I didn't hear that.
You didn't get recalled.
Yeah, you tried. They tried. It didn't work. All right.
You got to build on that.
The redirection is really a conforming issue, I think. No, it's not. Okay. Redirection of county. Oh, this is telling you what to do with it if you did it. But my concern is if we did it in the first place, sort of. If we don't do it in the first place, there's sort of no conversation here. I guess is why I treat it that way. But this is, go ahead, present it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For this last item, the governor is proposing to redirect a portion of county savings from other reductions and increased federal funds to fund increased county shares of cost in foster care, adoption assistance, and the child welfare services programs for general fund savings of about $505.5 million in 2010-11. As you said, this proposal is contingent upon your actions on other proposals and the federal funds that we may receive from the feds. To the extent that there are county savings, we think this proposal merits some discussion or some consideration by the legislature because it may achieve some general fund savings without potentially reducing service levels. However, as your agenda lays out very well, we do think that the proposal also poses some significant legal risks for the state and could create potentially create a reimbursable state mandate. So if you consider this after your other decisions, we would recommend that you work with the counties and the administration to reach a consensus on these issues before enacting any changes.
Thank you. Finance, did you have a...
We would look forward to working with all interested parties relative to the issues or concerns relative to the mandate. We agree that there are areas that need to be looked at, and we look forward to working with folks.
Okay. I take it there's public comment on this one? Or is there public comment on all three of these or whatever? I think you're mostly here on the last one. Is that what I'm seeing? Well, on the redirection, you're on Prop 10. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Frank Mecca, CWDA. With respect to the last issue, clearly it assumes you're going to make big changes that we don't support in other program areas. But we would suggest that even if you did, that this proposal isn't warranted. Basically, the proposal ignores the current funding reality within the realignment structure of these programs. The county shares of social services programs were either increased or established in realignment legislation in 1991. And the deal was the counties get a bigger share of cost, and the counties get a revenue source to pay for that share of cost, and therefore it's not a mandate issue. It's a neutral proposition with respect to the counties. Because of shortfalls in the realignment revenue source, the realignment is projected in the budget year to be $1 billion in arrears to the counties per year. So the funding that you provided us in 1991 to allegedly pay for...
Is this the 0.65 of the VLF? Or is it something else?
It's VLF, and mostly sales tax goes to social services.
What
so it was realignment was
tax?
Vehicle license fee and sales tax.
But it was the 0.65 of the VLF?
For health and mostly for health and mental health. And for social services, we got an increased increment in the sales tax. And that was the state's way to say, we imposed a new share of cost for you, but we also gave you a revenue source to pay for it. The base funding is about $500 million in arrears, and the governor's budget projects that the caseload growth that occurred since 1991 would be about $500 million in arrears. So the counties are already paying out of county funds $1 billion a year to cover the shortfall in realignment. And so the idea that we could sort of scoop new savings that the counties achieve to pay for a new share of cost kind of implies that we're whole in the base. And we're $1 billion short. And so what we would argue is that when the $1 billion hole is full, sure, let's have a discussion about whether or not the state and counties, could talk about additional realignment. The part of this proposal, though, also scoops ARA savings, the federal stimulus savings. Last year, you achieved savings from ARA when increased funds for example, the IHSS FMAP. But the counties have a share of IHSS too, so counties achieve some savings. We use those savings to prevent further layoffs in CPS social workers and further cuts in our programs. And so the governor's proposal says only the state can really afford to save based on federal stimulus funding. We can no longer afford to have the counties achieve any of those savings, even though we expect them to be our partner in paying for the programs. So we think the proposal sort of fundamentally violates the notion of a partnership, and we would concur with the concerns that this is highly legally questionable, both in terms of a mandate claim and in terms of a violation of Proposition 1A's prohibition against increasing county shares of cost.
Finance, do you want to explain? I hadn't kind of focused on that. You're actually proposing to take their savings from the ARA? I didn't realize that was part of it. I understood the IHSS, if CalWORKS and IHSS go away, theory that there's savings, but I'm not quite sure I understand the part about the...
It does include the ARA component as well, Madam Chair.
So how would that work? In other words, the state would keep it and redirect it on our own? Interesting problem. Sounds like another good lesson. All right. I'm not sure that one works. We've lost some of those main data
lawsuits in the past. With respect to the practical reality, the administration's proposal looks at the bottom line. It aggregates all counties and says we're going to take 75% of the savings, and that's enough to pay for the new county share of cost. That doesn't necessarily mean that it pencils out county by county.
Yeah, no, it's different.
So the fact that the bottom line pencils out doesn't mean you don't have a mandate exposure for an individual county. And just, the last point, the trailer bill language that was presented by the administration doesn't make the new share of cost contingent on any of the other stuff happening. It would just say it happens because we think the counties will achieve savings. So the language is highly problematic, but not nearly as problematic as the notion conceptually.
All right. Thank you very much.
Martha Flammer, representing the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors in opposition to this proposal, to the redirection of county savings. Mr. Mecca has eloquently pointed out some of the reasons, and thank you very much.
Thank you for your brevity.
Madam Chair and members, I'm actually here on the Prop 10 piece, so I don't know.
That's fine.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm here representing the County of Santa Barbara as well as Jewish Public Affairs Committee of California. We have a lot of concerns with the state scooping those funds. That's how we actually support our children's health care programs locally. You're going to leave us, again, in an additional deficit in addition to taking all the other funds. We have those funds budgeted out several years as we're supposed to, and by taking them, you're going to be eliminating a lot of those programs locally, and we're very concerned about that. So,
well, maybe I'll wait for you on this one. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, Dawn Kepke on behalf of the Child Abuse Prevention Center. Child Abuse Prevention Center is a nonprofit community-based organization based here in Sacramento, but has reach statewide. We have grave concerns about all the cuts we've talked about today, particularly from their impacts on child abuse and neglect. But specific to also the Prop 10 redirection, we're highly concerned and opposed to that. The Child Abuse Prevention Center was one of the key opponents to the measure last year on the ballot, and will continue to oppose that. Nationally, the cost of child abuse is estimated conservatively to be at about $103.8 billion. Those are based on 2007 numbers, and direct costs being about $33.1 billion. And those essentially cover hospitalization, mental health, child welfare services, law enforcement, and other costs, as well as indirect costs of $70.7 billion relative to special education, other programs and services. The Child Abuse Prevention Center, as well as other organizations like it, are in desperate, search of funding to work on prevention services and programs, and that funding is increasingly hard to come by. We work very hard with foundations, federal government, as well as the First Five Commission to obtain resources to fund programs that are producing tremendous results in the communities throughout the state. In particular, I'd like to draw your attention to an example here in Sacramento County. It's a home visitation program that the Child Abuse Prevention Center has been engaged in, whereby the home visitation program was evaluated recently and determined that it had a 99% success rate for at-risk families, for keeping them out of the CPS system, and for 89% success rate for those that were at risk and that had already been contacted by CPS for continuing to keep them out of the system. So the successes are there. They're documented, and we'll be providing those to you. But even more so, it's important to note that the Child Abuse Prevention Center estimates that about $150 million each year out of First Five funds go to prevention, and that those funds will be sorely missed and have great impacts on the state and child welfare services in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sherry Novick with the First Five Association, representing the county not the county welfare directors. They were already here.
They already did that.
I'm not looking for a new job.
Yeah.
The county First Five commissions. You did hear extensive testimony last week, so I won't go over that ground, but I wanted to comment specifically about the proposal related to child welfare services. I think both the legislative analysts' analysis of this issue and the governor's proposal reinforce a really serious misperception about First Five. The LAO said that the purpose of the Prop 10 was designed to enhance previously existing core programs. In fact, that is not at all what the design was for. If you read the act, it says, and I have to remind you that this is the act that was enacted by the voters in 1998 and re-supported in 2 subsequent elections. The purpose is to implement an integrated, comprehensive system of information and services to enhance optimal early childhood development. Well, in the area of child welfare services, that is precisely what has happened. Every commission has a member of the Board of Supervisors and at least 2 county officials on it. Those are welfare directors, mental health directors, public health directors. The commissions are the county, and they invest those first $5 in county services. In child welfare services last year, and this is before the cuts that hit the counties in the current year budget, which really increased these numbers, but last year $160 million, a little more actually, was invested in child abuse prevention, which you just heard about, intensive family case management, home visitation for high-risk families and pregnant women, training for law enforcement about how to respond when they go into a domestic violence situation and there are young children there, day and residential treatment for mothers found screened positive for substance abuse, support for babies while their moms are in treatment, social worker and public health nurse positions in the county, and those have really increased since the most recent cuts. Training for welfare workers, and you probably saw, in fact, I just had the sergeants pass out an article that just last Friday was in the Bee, pointing out that the First Five Commission here responded positively to a request from CPS, and I might add it was also from the DA's office, to make up the funding that was lost for screening of kids, physical checkups of kids who were removed from their homes. These are not children who are necessarily going to be removed from their home, but they were children at risk of removal. And the First Five Commission went beyond just paying for the checkups to pay for home visitation, developmental screening, prevention, and education services, because those are the services that keep these kids out of the foster care system. That's the difference. I mean, that is what First Five has brought and integrated into child welfare services. It's not just adding on to something that was there, which implies some sort of frivolous add-ons. It's deeply integrated into child abuse prevention and child welfare services. If it weren't for First $5, I don't think there's a county that would have a meaningful differential response program. First Five funds the services that families can go to when there is not, we used to call blood on the floor, when a child is not removed, but the family's clearly having issues. That family can get real services. So I just object strenuously to this notion that kind of comes up that these are dollars that are out there to be used. They are being used. Also, the term leverage came up. First Five Sacramento just invested $750,000 in this program. They are going to match it 1-to-1 with Title 19 dollars. They're going to double those dollars. First $5 leverage all the time. Now, they don't leverage so that you can score it necessarily, and I understand that. I understand that problem. But I think it would be more honest to say we're, for both the governor and anybody else doing analysis, we're looking for money to fill holes, and that's a funding stream. I think it's not honest to say these dollars are somehow not being put to their best use. So I would...
in that vein, have you done the survey yet to figure out, the governor also suggests that there would be voluntary contributions, and we have been, the beneficiary of those in the last couple of years for both Healthy Families and for a couple of other programs, and I don't know what's left in those reserves to actually, for you to generously donate.
Well, I can tell you at the last meeting, I can't speak for the State Commission because the State Commission is totally separate from the counties, but at the last State Commission meeting this also came up, and they're clearly very serious about thinking about what they might contribute.
Yeah, but they contributed last year to Healthy Families,
That's right.
and I think I'm just trying to get a handle on some of those numbers.
I can say at the county
because then we don't need the vote. I mean, it's sort of this complicated thing of, to the extent, and I think you're right. I mean, I think the wording of 10 is different, and some of the thought process goes to 63. 63 was a little clear. Its wording is different and really said supplemental to baseline services that we're due in a certain day. First Five kind of doesn't say that, right?
Well, it says that the services are, that the money is intended to not supplant existing service levels.
I see.
So what that means...
But expansion of Healthy Families in the last 10 years would count then. I mean, existing service levels, if you think of it in those terms, caseload 10 years ago.
And some, there are different interpretations. This has never been litigated, and I hope that we don't have to ever litigate it, because that's a lot of money down the drain. But there's an interpretation that new children coming in are there's different interpretations of that. But what I would say is that at the county level, when I mentioned who serves on the commissions, they are county officials, by and large, and other experts from the community who are really looking at keeping things as whole as possible at the local level. In all honesty, we were approached, the association and the county commissions were approached by the Department of Developmental Services agency and Department of Finance to say, will you give $50 million to the Early Start program? Because the governor vetoed $50 million last year, blue penciled it, and put language in that his intent was to go get this from First Five. Well, that is hard to argue is not supplantation, first of all, in the minds of many of our county councils, because the intent was there. You can't say, ooh, well, we're just picking up. So that's one issue. But the other issue is that just about the very same time that we held our first meeting to start talking about what are the possibilities and what can we do and what are we already doing, the governor's budget came out with the proposed ballot measure, and so immediately county commissions say, well, wait a minute, we don't even know what money we'll have. So it's a very awkward timing issue when you talk about what county.
Well, it's awkward to have both proposals on the table at the same time. Get that part. Okay. Anything else? Anybody else have any other questions? Senator Dutton.
And this will be real quick. I just need some help clarifying something that came up earlier when I mentioned about 30% of the nation's welfare being here in California. The numbers I was looking at came from the United States Department of Health and Human Services, the temporary assistance for needy families. And according to their 08 numbers, California has 1.2 million, a little over 1.2 million recipients. Now, that's far greater than any other state. New York's got like 255,000. Texas is 115. So my question is, I need to have an understanding as to why we seem to be a larger magnet for that. The other thing, too, I need some help verifying. It's my understanding we have about 6 million people or so on Medi-Cal at this time.
That's the usual number, unless it's gone up.
That's about 15% of the population, of the California population. Does that sound about right?
That's been the number for a long time, the 6 million, I know. I mean, I don't know if it's still.
But I would really like to know what's the difference that makes us so desirable with regards to the assistance for needy families, and why we have so many more than any other state. Hey, if somebody could answer that for me
also
later
the highest rates of poverty in the nation.
That's the most.
Well,
the highest
that's
rates of poverty
kind of embarrassing too, isn't it?
But that's mostly the reason, and the highest rates of uninsured. But Mr. Mecca, did you have a comment on that as you were? Or were you? I think some of it is the design of the program issue and who counts, right?
In the interest of time and given the complexity of the issue, with, if it's okay with the senator, I think we'd like to work up a memo and present it to the committee.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because I think it is partly this who we count and how we count them and how much they're working and some of those issues. We count folks, they may be receiving $10 of a grant, but they receive what we did when we designed CalWorks. This is, I'm looking, I'm remembering, only I have to look at you to remember. But I think some of it, and this goes to what you said earlier about the design, we consider somebody a CalWorks recipient even if we're not paying them a grant and only paying them their Medi-Cal and their child care, right? I mean, they may still be considered sort of CalWorks because we're providing supportive services for their child care so they can work. They may not actually receive a grant, so that may be some of the numbers may include
that's the reason I went to the.
That's why
that's the reason I went to the Department of Health and Human Services numbers, because basically they should be looking at all states the same. So that's what.
But every program is different.
In a sense, for example, they don't. They'll count in the California column. They'll count relative guardianship payments. It's sort of a quasi foster care payment that California chose to use TANF money for. Because of the way that program is structured, they count as a recipient. New York created a state earned income tax credit where they provide a subsidy to the federal earned income tax credit.
The tax break?
It's basically it's a credit for low income working people. A credit for low income working people.
Refundable credit.
It's a large program, and it's funded out of their TANF grant. So they subsidize a large number of people through the tax system funded by TANF. Those people don't show up in the New York count. And so if you're looking at the
we proposed that in the original one.
Same thing with Texas.
Folks opposed it.
Well, I have a hard time. How can anybody come up with numbers then if they're not apples for apples?
It's very, very difficult to make an apples to apples comparison, and that's just one example. And I don't mean to imply that that tells the entire story. So, in the interest of sort of a comprehensive answer to your question, I would like the opportunity to submit something a little bit more comprehensive.
Okay, I appreciate it.
I'm
just trying to understand. That's all.
No, I think it is helpful, and I think it's a fair conversation. I think it is helpful to understand. Who are we talking about, and what is it that we've designed that causes us to look the way we do? And a lot of it is how we use that. Because TANF was a block grant, every state had a chance to use it differently. We use it to give folks work-study grants in community colleges so they can become nurses and get off welfare. I don't know how, what I mean, other states may not do that, and I think some of those folks count in different ways. So anyway, numbers of people versus amount of grant, because the amount of the block grant has not changed since 1997. So the amount of money that we spend on the program has not changed since 1997. The question then is, how do you use it? And it's mostly been until 2 years ago when we had the recession hit, we had a 50% decline in caseload, which was the goal of the program, was to get people to work, and it was working. We got to the place we're still spending the money because the people we were serving were harder to serve. Greater resources, cost of child care, some of those issues. And now our caseload is going back up because of unemployment. And that's some of the folks we heard from today, and the folks in El Dorado County and places where they never would have considered that, but their unemployment benefits run out and now they're going to CalWorks. I mean, we are seeing some of that. I think that you're seeing that in the caseloads, but we might want to recheck those caseload numbers and see what's happening this year if we're starting, because my guess is the people that went back on in 08, 09 are very similar to the folks from 97, 98 who get off real fast. I mean, they're folks that are employable. They don't require a ton of services to get back in the loop. They do need child care and Medi-Cal because they don't have insurance. But we probably ought to kind of take a look at what that means. Anyway, okay. Thank you all very much, everybody, for your patience. Meeting is adjourned.